everyone. In this video, we're going to continue looking at adding rational expressions. So for example 2, we have x over x squared minus 1 plus 3 over x squared plus 4x minus 5. So you may want to pause the video and try this problem yourself and then come back and see how you did. To begin, we need to find the LCD, the least common denominator. So to do that, I'm going to factor my first denominator here, which is x squared minus 1. And that factors as x minus 1, x plus 1. Next, I need to factor x squared plus 4x minus 5. So let's factor this. If you recall, we'll need two sets of parentheses. I need an x and an x. Now, the last sign is negative, so that tells me I'm going to need two different signs in my factors. I need a number in these end positions. I need two numbers in these end positions that multiply to give me negative 5 and add together to give me 4. So I'm going to need a negative 1 and a plus 5. And if we just check that, we'll use the FOIL method to check it. So first, x squared. Outers, positive 5. Inners, negative 1. So plus 5 and a negative 1, that gives me 4. Great. And then the last terms multiply to give me negative 5. Great. All right. Now, in terms of my LCD, what are the ingredients we'll need? Well, common to both of these is an x minus 1. So we just need one of those. I'll also need to pick up an x plus 1. And I'll also need to pick up an x plus 5. In this way, we've covered all of the factors, but we don't have more than what we need. That's why it's the least common denominator. All right. Now, let's fix up each of these fractions. So I'm going to come over here and say convert. The first fraction I'm working with is x over x squared minus 1. Now, that's fine to write it that way, but I think it's going to be a lot clearer and easier to work with if we write this in the factored form. Because when you work with things in factored form, you can really see what they're made up of, and it's a lot easier to see which factors you're missing. So I'm just going to rewrite my first fraction here in factored form for that denominator. All right, so I need to multiply that by something that gives me my desired least common denominator. And the desired least common denominator had an x minus 1 and x plus 1 as factors and the x plus 5 as a factor. So you see, by working with things in factored form, I can really see that this was what's missing. So this x plus 5, that was my missing factor. So that's what I needed to multiply by. I'm going to multiply top and bottom. Remember, when you have the same thing top and bottom, that's like a giant 1. And multiplying anybody by 1 doesn't change the value, just changes the appearance. Okay, great. So now let's go through with our multiplication. Up in the numerator, I'm going to have x times parentheses x plus 5. And I'll distribute that in a minute. For now, I just want to keep my bookkeeping really organized so I don't miss anything. And then in the denominator, we're just multiplying all the factors. I've kept them here. They're all written out. That looks good. Okay. Moving on. Let's take a look at our next fraction here. Let's use a different color. So this puppy looks like a 3 over x squared plus 4x minus 5. Again, I'm going to write that in factored form. So I've got an x minus 1 and an x plus 5 in that denominator. I need to multiply by something, same thing top and bottom, so that I obtain my desired least common denominator, which had an x minus 1 as a factor, an x plus 1 is a factor and an x plus 5 is a factor. So let's compare. What did we have? X minus 1, check, check. X plus 5, check, check. The missing factor was the x plus 1. That's what was missing. So I'm going to multiply that top and bottom. Multiplying through. 3 times x plus 1 up in the top, and my denominator is what it is. Alrighty, I am now ready to do the final step. So the final step, just label it here. We've got a lot of pieces going on. So final step, I had the x times x plus 5 all over my least common denominator. And I'm getting a little bit lazy because that denominator is so big, I don't want to keep writing it over and over. So I'll write the least common denominator there, and I'm really just adding up my numerators. Okay, so for the final step, we are going to write down all of the details. The first fraction I had there was the x times x plus 5 over my least common denominator, x minus 1, x plus 1, x plus 5. And if that gets too tedious to write for some of these, you can just use the phrase LCD, but it is good to write everything out. Next fraction was the 3x plus 1 over the least common denominator. Okay, final answer. Everybody over the least common denominator. And up in the numerator, I needed to multiply x times x and an x times 5. So we've got x squared plus 5x. In the second fraction, I've got 3 times x and a 3 times 1. So final answer here, I've got x squared plus 8x plus 3 all over my least common denominator. And I'm done. Now you might say, oh, maybe I can simplify, and we can look at this numerator x squared plus 8x plus 3 and see, can I factor that at all? The answer is no, we cannot factor it. It's good that we checked, but we can't factor that, and we can't simplify any further. Maybe you could clean up the denominator by multiplying all this out, but we have accomplished the most difficult part of the problem so far.